Thank you very much for that brief introduction. So I'll just share my slides for a while. Just checking if you are able to see my slides. Okay, so I'll just, yes, okay. Sige, I will be presenting the CCET process, and my presentation is divided into 4 main parts. So first, I will be discussing the basis for tagging. So why do we exactly tag? What's the role and responsibilities of the key or the relevant stakeholders that are needed in the tagging process. Second, I will walk you through the journey so far from the inception of or from the inception and conceptualization of the tagging process until the latest work that we've done so far in with respect to the CCET. And then the third part will focus on the process itself. So we will walk you through the templates, the process for submission, and the decision tree. How do you exactly identify your PAPs, whether or not you are also addressing climate change based on your PAPs. No? So I will walk you through that process under the third bullet. And then the last portion of my presentation, we will just share with you the CCT over the years, and also some of the quick facts in terms of the implementation of the CCET. So apology lang po, I would like to apologize lang po, no? Nag-CC ka ako ngayon. So baka lang may ubuhin ako. So anyways, so first, how did we institutionalize the National CCET process? So please take note that although we shared the video on both the national and the local CCET process, for this particular leg of our presentation, we will just be sharing with you the process on the national CCET. So, din po. Pati pala ako na mute. Sige. So first would be the basis for the tagging. So actually, we started this when there was the Climate Change Act in 2009, which established the Climate Change Commission. And the role of the Climate Change Commission is to come up with policies on climate change, and at the same time monitor and evaluate the climate programs of government. The law was amended 3 years after, so in 2012, it was amended to include certain provisions, one of which is identifying the role of the Department of Budget and Management, wherein they are mandated to spearhead the formulation of annual appropriations for our climate programs. So when we started po, no, when the act was amended in 2012, DBM and CCC sat down and we discussed how exactly do we implement the mandates being assigned to us. And so at that time, in around 2012 po, no, World Bank and UNDP came up with the CPER, and they are providing this kind of study for developing countries. So ito pong CPER, or the Climate Public Expenditure and Institutional Review, DBM and Climate Change Commission worked together with World Bank for us to come up with a study, yung tinatawag natin CPER, no? So they kind of reviewed the expenditure, the public expenditure process of the Philippines, and see where we would be able to identify how, kasi ang main question at that time was, we wanted to see as government, how much exactly are we allocating for our climate programs, no, for addressing climate change. we always the delegation, no, when we negotiate in the UN climate conventions, we always say that you need to support us because we're already doing this much. But if you would like to come up with a quantitative analysis of exactly how much are we allocating, how much exactly are we appropriating, or how much exactly is the cost for implementing our climate programs, kulang tayo sa quantitative analysis, no? So this actually this tagging process sort of helped the Philippine government come up with the figures for identifying how much exactly is the government allocating for its climate programs, no? And what exactly are those climate programs? So after the CPR study was done in 2013, a few months after, we were able to issue, both DBM and CCC issued Joint Memo Circular 2013-01. And ito pong Joint Memo Circular po natin, this actually provides guidelines for all GOCCs, SUCs, and NGAs, or yung national government agencies po natin, the process of tagging. So how exactly do you tag? What are the templates? What are the typologies to guide agencies in tagging, no? So nilabas po namin yan noong 2013-01. Based na rin po ito doon sa recommendations of the CPR study. So unlike other countries po kasi, no, after the study, yun lang, nag-study lang. But for us, we saw the value of the recommendations from the CPR study, and we identified measures, come up with a policy issuance that would mainstream the recommendations of that study. So doon po nabuo yung first joint issuance po ng DBM and CCC. And this was amended 2 years after we saw some things that we needed to revise. And also, in view of the need to come up with an additional template that would help agencies identify din po or describe whether or not this particular PAP is indeed a climate program, no? Or it indeed addresses climate change because of the proposal or because of this particular program. So yun po yung inamend po namin yung nagkaroon po tayo ng revision ng ating joint memo circular. So in terms of the institutions and roles, no, the roles and responsibilities based on the national level. So babalikan ko lang din po, no, yung sa previous presentation. We also have another joint issuance. So as presented also in the video, we also have a joint issuance, both DBM and CCC with DILG, to provide guidance for local government units. So, but for this particular presentation, we will just focus on the national CCET process. So these are the roles and responsibilities po, no? The Climate Change Commission, our role is to monitor, track, evaluate, and report the agency's climate tag PAPs. Second, we are also tasked to review and approve CCET new typology proposals. Third is to provide a help desk, because based on the experience also in implementing the CCET process, both DBM and CCC received a lot of queries on how to do this, how do we exactly tag. So there was a need now to provide a help desk to answer the queries and to answer and to provide assistance to NGAs in the CCET process. And then last is together with DBM, we build the capacity of agencies to undertake the CCET. And then for the LGUs naman po, it's the role of the DILG to provide capacity building naman din po, with assistance of course from DBM and CCC in the conduct of the capacity building activity or orientation seminars for LGUs. But for the national government agencies, so it's DBM and CCC po. DBM, on the other hand, they are the ones tasked to ensure that CCET is included in the annual issuances of their memoranda, both the national and corporate budget memoranda. And also, second is to provide the Climate Change Commission the generated budget forms at the national level because we have different stages din po in the budget process. Ano? We have the agency request. So, at the start of the budget season, agencies work on their budget proposals. And then, so if you have climate programs that you wanted to include in your proposal, doon po nagsa-start yung CCET process po natin. So nag-generate po natin, di ba, exactly who are the agencies who are that are proposing climate programs, how much are they proposing, etc. So that's at the AR level. And then this will be consolidated by the DBM, and then of course based on the fiscal space, no, they will come up with the NEP figures. So syempre malalaman din po natin sa NEP level ilan po ba yung pumasok or di ba ilan po yung na-consider doon sa NEP budget po, NEP figures po natin for CCET. So si DBM na po na-generate yan. And then once the GAA is already released, the figures for the GAA, they're also the ones generating din po the figures po based on the budget that's approved already. So they're the ones we normally request po, no? We always request din po from DBM those figures po for the NEP and the GAA levels. So the role naman po of the NGAs, SUCs, and GOCCs is to, of course, first identify and tag climate change in the budget forms. So we do have different forms din po for each NGA type. Second is establish and document baseline for identified climate change programs, activities, and projects. And third is to accomplish and submit the CCET proposed PAPs to the Climate Change Commission and the Department of Budget and Management. So ito naman po yung the development and enhancement of the National Climate Budgeting System po natin. So I'll just walk you through this timeline. Ano? So we started actually in 2013. So remember po, when the law was amended in 2012, there were already provisions on the role of the Climate Change Commission and DBM. So we, so as early as January po, the following year, we did an initial work po on the CC expenditure tagging. In June, the CPR study was launched. And in December po, we were able to issue the first joint memo circular for the CCET, which provides guidance for all GOCCs, SUCs, and NGAs. In 2014, DBM issued a circular to tag the NEP and the GAA. So to identify the climate programs that are included in the NEP and the GAA figures po natin. And then they also did a review. In 2014, we did a review of the first year of implementation. And based on that, we were able to update the JMC based on the parang pilot testing namin at that time. In 2015, January, we issued po the amended DBM-CCC JMC 2015-01. So in 2016, we right away initiated an orientation seminar on CCET for national government agencies. So please take note from 2016 po, we only focused our attention on providing this kind of orientation for NGAs pa lang po, no? So hindi pa po kasama at that time yung GOCCs and SUCs. And then we also introduced the quality assurance of climate change expenditure because at that time, the figures or the templates that were available is just to provide lang po the PAP and the corresponding amount. But there's no way for us to identify whether or not this particular activity is indeed a climate program. So there has to be a description for us to, that would serve as a basis for us to evaluate that particular PAP. And so the quality assurance and review form was introduced. And in 2017, we were able to revise for the typologies for CCET and the designation po of the Climate Change Commission as the CCET Help Desk. And then in August of 2017, DBM already started coming up with the climate change expenditures, and they included it already in the BESF. Kasi po before, no, you notice ang na-monitor pa lang po namin ngayon or the entry points for the CCET is actually the appropriations pa lang po. Since we started it in 2014, lumabas pa lang po nung 2017 po at least yung mga actual expenditures na po, no? So, yun na po yung naging focus po namin. So, we started already, DBM already started including CCE expenditures in the BESF. In 2018, the Climate Change Commission launched its NICDs portal. It's a sub-portal of our CCC website where we provide information po on various where we provide various climate information. So that includes already information on the national and local CCETs. And then in 2019, based on our experience po, no, because we normally do annual meetings and assessment of the implementation of the, or we reviewed po the implementation of the CCET. And so we noticed po, no, that since it's not mandatory for agencies to also submit the QAR forms, and just the BP201F and 711 and BP 7 and Form 711 for GOCCs naman po, no. There's no way for the Climate Change Commission to really review whether or not this particular PAP that the agency is proposing is indeed a climate program. And so one of the interventions that we suggested and also we worked on with DBM is for DBM now, based on the lessons learned, no, DBM in its issuance of their National Budget Memorandum, they now mandated the government agencies to secure CCC approval of their respective CCET QAR forms. So it now becomes mandatory for agencies if you wanted to propose, if you have a budget proposal and you do have climate programs in your proposals, you have to ensure that the climate change proposals po, no, or yung CC expenditure PAPs niyo po, CC PAPs niyo po, no, climate change tag PAPs, sorry, were reviewed by the Climate Change Commission and that you were able to get a letter of approval from the Climate Change Commission before po kayo mag-submit sa DBM. So ang nangyayari po nun, once you were able to identify your CCET, kailangan po may approval po ni Climate Change Commission before po kayo mag-submit sa DBM, because DBM will now review and see if you are able to submit po yung form 711 and BP201F. Pag nag-submit po kayo nun at meron po kayong information doon about your climate tag PAPs, kung wala po siyang approval letter from the Climate Change Commission, ay hindi po siya i-consider as a CCET proposal. So yun po yung isang enhancement po namin in the system. And then in 2020, when we had the pandemic po, no, na-experience po natin yung lockdown at that time during ECQ. And I remember when we were discussing this March pa lang, as early as March, February, March, sabi namin na nagkaroon ng lockdown, how do we now proceed with the how do we ensure po that we are able to provide that kind of service po to our stakeholders, in ensuring din po that they are guided in terms of tagging po, no, tagging of their climate programs. So we launched po an online platform. So meron po tayong online webinar. We started this as early as April. So to make sure lang din po that we are able to deliver that kind of service to our stakeholders. And then in 2021, actually po, since 2016, we've never really had a specialized session on the CCET or a customized session on the CCET for SUCs and GOCCs. For GOCCs po, we started it late. I think around 2018, 2019, we were able to include them as one of the, we were able to have a session for GOCCs during our national orientation for national government agencies. But for SUCs po, wala. Because at that time, face-to-face po yun, and we didn't have budget at that time to do the Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao leg, no? Just to have a specialized session for SUCs. But we do have other programs. We do have other capacity building activities for SUC. So I think some of the SUCs have attended our core training workshops, our LCCAP training workshops. If you would recall po yung mga workshops na yon, we were able to include a 30-minute or a 1-hour session on the tagging process. And based on our experience, we do receive a lot of queries on that. So actually, sa dalawa po, GHG inventory at saka yung CCET po, yung madami kaming questions na na-receive from SUCs. And so, because of this po, no, it's a good thing na rin po that we were able to shift from a face-to-face to an online webinar, because we were able to now reach as many stakeholders as possible. So in 2021, we collaborated, CCC and the DBM collaborated with SHED for the SUCs. And for the SUCs po, we had a session po na Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, similar to this year po. And then we partnered with GCG for the GOCCs naman din po. So for this year, and then starting po 2021, magiging annual na rin po yung orientation namin for SUCs and GOCCs na rin po, na may specialized session po tayo. Similar to the NGAs, kasi we've done an annual orientation since 2016. So ngayon po, meron na po tayong ganun po for SUCs and GOCCs na rin po. We started actually also our collaboration with DENR for the harmonization of the PCBRRP, the Risk Resiliency Program. So parang program convergence budgeting na rin po. So how do we mainstream or how do we harmonize the CCET with the RRP? So we collaborated with the DENR din po in making sure that we would have a session on this, no? And then we also received din po special requests from agencies and SUCs and GOCCs kung pwede po bang may special session lang po for them. So we also accommodate po yung mga requests from SUCs, from NGAs and GOCCs din po. So minsan nagkakaroon po kami ng mga Zoom orientations lang po just for them, para po mas ma-explain pa namin na maigi, and they would walk us through their PAPs, and then we would right away give our inputs to that. So may mga ganun din po kaming ginagawa for them. And then based on our experience din po doon sa mga submissions of the SUCs, there are SUCs po kasi they are telling us that dinadaan din po nila sa RDCs yung kanilang mga proposals, no? Yung kanilang mga climate change proposals din po, for instance. So ang recommendation po nila sa amin, maybe it would be good to touch base with NEDA as well as the regional offices para ma-determine namin when exactly do we hold these orientation workshops for SUCs para makasabay doon sa pag-submit nila sa NEDA. Tama yan, sa NEDA. And at the same time, makasabay din po doon sa budget cycle po natin. So may mga ganun na din po. So we started our initial discussions din po with NEDA and the regional offices as well as BARM BPDA para po ma-determine din po namin what's the most appropriate time for us to do that orientation for SUCs, to ensure lang din po na makasabay din po yung mga proposals na yan doon sa budget cycle din po ng SUCs. So we did have some recommendations after that workshop that we did last November. So the tagging process, siguro po before po some of the sorry pa, session na bumabalik ako dito. If you would notice po, no, in the timeline itself, mainstreaming the CCET has always been at the budget preparation and execution. But if you would look at the planning and budget cycle, yung entire spectrum po nun, yung continuum po nun, ano, kailangan din po natin ma-determine from the planning to budget execution to audit, no? So how do we exactly see the CCET in that spectrum, no? So there are some initial discussions na rin po on that. We are also trying to improve na rin on the process this year. Hopefully, we would be able to also do an assessment of the actual implementation of the CCET. So, kung makikita niyo po dito, we do have the figures, pero wala pa po kami, of course, that one is being done by DBM, but in terms of assessing or evaluating the quality of the implemented climate programs, we've never done that pa. So we wanted to start that this year. And also we are coordinating also closely with COA and see how we would be able to also mainstream CCET in the possible audit policy of COA, for instance. So those things are still being discussed pa. We've never had an assessment before of the implementation of the CCET. So we initiated that last year. Kakatapos lang din po, we just finished the study. And there are specific recommendations for us to look into. So those things we are trying to also review and see if there is a need for us to issue a new policy to make sure lang din po that CCET is further mainstreamed po in the planning and budget cycle. So ito po yung tagging process din po natin. Again, this was discussed na rin po in the videos and also in the presentation of Chief Jerome earlier. So there are actually two main strategies to address climate change. So first is climate change mitigation. So this one po is different from disaster risk mitigation, and we cannot stress this enough because we still receive din po submissions din po that they are trying to interchange din po yung disaster risk mitigation with climate change mitigation. Magkaiba po yun. When you talk about climate change mitigation, you're talking about how do you reduce emissions and how do you avoid future emissions because of your activities. So, ito po ay human intervention or yung tinatawag na anthropogenic, to address anthropogenic or human-induced emissions by sources and removals by sinks. So, ito po, there are actually 6 greenhouse gases, main greenhouse gases that you need to account for. 7 na po yan sa UNFCCC procedures din po natin, but mostly po it's carbon dioxide. So if there are activities that would enable you to reduce or avoid emissions of carbon dioxide or absorb carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, PFCs or perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride yung SF6, and may nakalimutan pa ako, hydrofluorocarbons, so HFCs. So if you have activities din po that would help you identify that these are your sources of emissions, that's why po nag-greenhouse gas inventory po yung mga tao, ano? Because it helps them identify po yung mga measures nila for mitigation. So anyways, if you have activities that would reduce emissions of these greenhouse gases, then you consider that as a mitigation activity. So, or any activity po that would help you identify your mitigation measures. Like for instance po, no, you don't know yet what your emissions are, but you wanted to know where your sources are and how much exactly are you emitting. That's why you're doing the greenhouse gas inventory, for instance. You can consider that as a strategy in your CCET, no? So these are just some of the examples po, no? We have waste management because you are reducing, mostly this one is for solid waste and wastewater. You are reducing emissions primarily carbon, methane and nitrous oxide. And then energy sources po natin like energy efficiency and also yung renewable energy. So if you are planning to install, let's say, solar panels in your schools or in your buildings, for instance, to reduce your carbon footprint, then that's considered as a mitigation strategy as well. And also promoting sustainable transport. That's also an example of a mitigation strategy. Now, even if you reduce emissions 100% right now, um, the emissions po that were, or the greenhouse gases that were emitted previous years, they stay in the atmosphere for a number of years. And if they stay in the atmosphere for a number of years, of course, it also has a significant effect din po dun sa ating climate system and nag-increase na rin po yung temperatures po natin because of the increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So how do you exactly adapt to a changing climate? How do you increase your resilience? How do you reduce your vulnerability to climate impacts? Those are exactly your adaptation measures. So if you are able to identify measures that would help you adapt to a changing climate or help you increase your resilience to a changing to a changing climate din, no? So that's considered as an adaptation measure. So it refers to an adjustment in your natural and human systems in response to a change in terms of actual or expected climatic stimuli. So ito po yung examples. These are actual examples po of agencies that are proposing po in their budget, in their budget proposals. No? So example of that would be building flood defenses, early warning systems, research din po on climate resistant crops, or simply coming up with policies and coming up with systems or developing tools to identify po yung inyong vulnerability to climate impacts, for instance. So those are just some examples of an adaptation measure which you could tag as under CCET. And then po, ito po yung national CCET decision tree po natin. So how do you determine if a particular program is a climate change expenditure or a climate change program? You need to first answer the question by looking at your PAPs. Titingnan nyo din po, is the main objective of this particular PAP intended to address climate change, or is it a climate change adaptation or mitigation program? If yes, you tag the entire PAP budget. If not, if that's not your main objective, you need to look into specific components of your PAP. Baka naman din po, there might be specific components in your PAP that addresses climate change. So if there are specific activities and you are able to identify the specific budget for that, then you just tag the proportion of that particular budget that is climate responsive. If not, then you don't need to tag that particular PAP. So ganun po yung ating decision tree. Now, to help you identify po no, yung mga typologies po natin, the Climate Change Commission and the DBM came up with the typology code manual. So it's an alphanumeric, it has an alphanumeric code. So ito po yun, ito po yung first sa sequence po natin, it's either it's an A or an M. So kapag kasi nakalagay po doon ay A, it means it's an adaptation measure. Your PAP is an adaptation PAP. The second one corresponds to the specific National Climate Change Action Plan thematic priority. So if it's one, it means it's food security. Kung 2 po siya, it's water sufficiency. Kung A1, ibig sabihin, it's an adaptation measure corresponding to food security. And then the third one corresponds to the sub-priority for each thematic priority. So medyo madami po yan. And then the fourth one, the fourth unit corresponds to a particular instrument. Is this PAP a policy? Is it an R&D PAP? Is it a cap building PAP, or is it a specific action delivery? And then the specific activity na rin po. So an example of that, ito po, may mga typology codes na din po tayo for this. So yan po yung example po nun. So the CCET Help Desk, we came up po with a visual guide to help agencies din po in the tagging process. So it starts with agency planning and programming. So normally, we in the strategic planning of a particular agency, that's where you would be able to identify the PAPs po and the specific programs din po that you wanted to be budgeted by from the GAA din po. And then in some instances, for GOCCs din po, other than the GAA din po, meron din po silang corporate budget and other sources of financing. Similar din po yun for SUCs, so meron din po yun. But for this particular CCET po, ang focus lang po natin is yung what we tag are just those that are based on the GAA. So yung GAA lang po, yung GAA funds lang po yung itatag po natin. Hindi po tayo muna magtatag sa ngayon, so yun lang po muna yung limitation of the program. We are not really tagging, parang if the source of your climate program is outside of the GAA, then hindi po muna natin siya i-count. Okay? So yun po. And then now, if you are able to identify po yung PAPs ninyo and then it has a climate program or a climate component, it addresses climate change, you need to identify din po the specific amounts. So you take po the you do the decision tree po as mentioned a while ago. And then after that, if you are able to identify po which of your PAPs have climate change components, you indicate that in the BP201F. For SUCs and NGAs, you use the BP201F. For GOCCs naman po, they use Form 711. Okay? So, kung ano po sa mga PAPs niyo that have climate programs, yun po ang ipapasok natin po sa BP201F. Okay? And then next po nun, after you've completed your BP201F, then you need to explain it in the QAR form, no? So, kasi as I explained before, if you would look at the BP201F and the Form 711 po, figures lang po yung mailalagay niyo doon. But the explanation why you are justifying that this particular PAP is a climate program, you explain it in the QAR form. Okay? So, sa QAR form, you fill out the form that we will be issuing, and then you characterize din the CCPAPs po, no. So you will fill up you will accomplish the form, and then you submit that to the Climate Change Commission for our review. Normally po, no. So dapat po when you submit your QAR for evaluation of the Climate Change Commission, you also submit to us your BP201F. Para po ma-cross-check din po namin. Okay? And then after that, we will be submitting to you there are some instances po that we would have some recommendations for revisions ng mga agencies. And then, ibibigay po namin sa inyo yon, and then we will wait for the revised QAR form and then we will review that based on the recommendations po namin. If you are able to incorporate our recommendations, and then after that, we will be issuing po a letter of approval. So ito po kasi ay nilagay po namin sa aming ARTA, nasa Citizens Charter na rin po namin ito. So the first review po namin, so once you submit to the Climate Change Commission, please give us 8 days. We will review your submissions po within 8 days, and then we will give it back to you. Kung wala na po kaming comments doon or suggestions for revision, we can issue already the letter of approval. If not po, magsa-stop the clock po muna kami. Aantayin po namin yung pagbalik po sa amin ng mga revised submissions ninyo. And then once you submit to us the revised submission, once you submit to us the revised document, we are given po, we will give you po 5 days po. So within 5 days po ay bibigay na po namin sa inyo yung letter of approval po. So may ganun po tayong process for reviewing po your QAR. So once you have that, you can now submit this to the OSBP, yung online submission portal po ng DBM for your particular proposal. The last leg po natin is reporting. So kami na po yan ni DBM. We normally do the reporting po of the NEP and the GAA figures po. Yung AR figures po kasi ay internal po ng DBM and CCC. So yun po. This is the example po of the BP201F. So this is the form that the SUCs and NGAs need to fill out. So ito po yun. Ito po yung form na yan. Ito po ay normally piniprepare po ng inyong mga budget officers and yung mga planning officers nyo din po. This one naman po is yung form 711 of the, this will be completed po by the GOCCs. So ito na po yung actual forms na naka-attach po sa National Budget Memorandum at yung Corporate Budget Memorandum po na ini-issue po ni DBM. So ito po for fiscal year, for the preparation of the budget for fiscal year 2023. So ito na po yung mga actual forms na binigay na po ni DBM sa inyo. Ito naman po yung QAR. This is the template. So again, kailangan din po signed din po yan ng inyong planning officer, budget officer, chief accountant at saka yung head of agency. Now, minsan po kasi there are experiences din po namin last year din po, for instance, na sign up din po ng president din po ng isang SUC. May nakita pa po kaming mga kailangan pa pong palitan dito. So ang gagawin po natin, pwede naman din po na sana before po sana dumaan din po sa signature na din po ng inyong head of agency. Maganda po na ma-review na rin po namin. Pwede naman po yun na ma-review na po namin yung inyong mga QARs. Basta po yung final po before po namin ma-issue yung letter of approval po ay signed na po siya. So pwede naman po yun, ma-review na po namin siya before nyo po ipapirma din po sa inyong mga heads of agencies po. So anyways, ito po yung template. So for the first column po, you just write your PAP. That's the reason why you also wanted to receive a copy of your BP201F or yung 711 form for GOCCs naman po. Because we wanted to cross-check kung nilagay nyo po doon sa BP201F nyo. So dapat, kung ano po yung nakalagay doon, yun din po yung i-explain nyo din po sa QAR. That's why it's important for us to see both documents. So the first column po corresponds to the PAP. So you just indicate your PAP that is climate responsive. The second form po is the typology code. So please note, ito po nagkakamali din, marami din pong mga revisions din po kaming sinasabi because the limitation right now of the system is that we only need to tag one typology for every PAP. So may mga iba po, may one PAP, madaming typologies na nilagay. So, babalikan po namin yung agency. Alin po ba dito ang pinaka-closest din po that would best describe your PAP? Kasi sa ngayon, one PAP, one typology pa lang po tayo. So, it's also possible wherein a particular PAP addresses both adaptation and mitigation. So, we need to decide and assess ano po ba yung mas matimbang? Kasi sa ngayon, yun nga po, one PAP, one typology po tayo. But you can explain here in your objectives that it addresses both adaptation and mitigation. So pwede po yun. The third and fourth columns po natin corresponds po to the main objective and the climate change objective of your particular PAP. So if your PAP's main objective is to address climate change, then it's possible po that your main objective is similar to your CC objective. So pwede na po siyang i-merge at isa na lang po yung explanation. There are some instances po na yun nga po sa decision tree, hindi naman po siya primarily for climate change, but there are some specific programs or subcomponents of that program that are climate responsive. Then you need to indicate your main objective and your CC objective. Okay? And then the fifth column po corresponds po to the climate risks that you're addressing. Okay? So yun po. And then the climate information used, ito po yung last column. So may mga iba po in our experience din po, may nagpadala din po sa amin ng feasibility study para masabi po nila na na-integrate na po nila dito sa yung climate change dito sa PAP na to, kaya po they consider this as a climate program. So kumbaga may mga ganun din po silang pinapakita din po sa amin. So you need to indicate here the climate information that you used. Did you use projections or were you able to do risk assessments, for instance? So you just indicate it here. So again, reminder po, ano, the limitation po ng system natin is, una, one PAP, one typology lang po muna tayo. Okay? And then, so you need to really assess what's the biggest portion that, what's the main objective po of your PAP. If it's really an adaptation or mitigation strategy, ano po yung mas matimbang? Second, what you should include in your BP201F and your QAR at the moment would be funds that are coming from the GAA. So GAA funds lang po muna tayo sa ngayon. There are instances, again, based on our experience in talking with various GOCCs and SUCs, they do have climate programs pero other source of financing po. It's outside the GAA po. So sa ngayon ay hindi pa po namin siya ina-account because yung system po natin at the moment is looking at how much exactly is the government allocating based on public funds pa lang po muna. But there are already some initial steps na rin po that we are thinking and we would like to improve na rin po in the next few years. Hopefully po we would be able to also account for climate programs din po that are budgeted po outside of the GAA. So yun po. So sa ngayon hindi pa po namin siya muna kinukuha, pero in the future po titingnan po namin how we would be able to account for it. So ito po, this one po, it's possible naman din po kasi, like for instance, this is actually an enhancement of our system because there are some agencies na nag-submit na po sila ng form last year. Same pa rin po yung kanilang PAPs for this year. And yung ipapropose nila for this year, for fiscal year, let's say 2023, we allow po for automatic approval. Kung pareho pa rin po yung inyong mga PAPs and pareho pa rin po yung mga components, and especially po doon sa mga projects po na multi-year din po siya. So kung na-approve na po namin siya before, wala po nagbago doon, we would issue po an automatic approval of your CCET, of your QARs po. The requirement there would be, you need to communicate to us officially. It has to be signed by the head of the agency or the institution that you are requesting for automatic CCET approval for fiscal year 2023. And you need to indicate po yung list of continuing CCE PAPs for fiscal year 2023. Para makita na din po namin, ma-review po namin sa system. Kung same pa rin po talaga siya, then wala po tayong pagbabago doon sa mga PAPs na isasubmit nyo din po sa amin, we will issue po an automatic approval po. So we will be entertaining the requests until April 8. April 8 po, yun po yung cut-off po namin, deadline po namin para ma-receive po yung mga requests from agencies, SUCs, and GOCCs. And the CCET Technical Help Desk, the Help Desk Technical Focal din po, shall communicate po to you, to your respective agencies din po on or before March 4. So mag-i-issue din po kami on or before March 4 po na magtatanong na din po kami sa inyo kung may mga parehong PAPs pa rin po ba kayong isasubmit din po sa amin. There are also some instances po, there are agencies po that have quick response funds, no? So sa QRF po nila, if your activities po, no, for the under the QRFs po are CC related. Then reminder lang po namin kung pwede niyo pong itag yun po sa itag niyo po under CCET. So ito po ay mga hydrometeorological hazards lang po, no? Pero if it's geologic din po, yung mga proposals niyo po ay geologic in nature, then hindi po muna namin siya i-consider kasi hydrometeorological hazards lang din po yung i-include din po natin for this one. So yun din po yung itatag nyo din po for CCET. So reminder lang din po, kung may mga QRFs po kayo, so reviewin nyo din po yun. Ano po ba yung mga proposals nyo din po for QRF funding? And if it's climate change related, then please tag it para din po maayos din po namin sa analysis din po natin. CCET over the years. So actually po, mamaya ipapakita ko po, may mga figures na rin po kami dito. For 2 weeks ago, we already received po the figures po from DBM. So for fiscal year 2022, around 289 billion po ang nakatag for this particular for this year's budget. Per the GAA figures po natin. And it's actually 5 billion higher po compared to the NEP for fiscal year 2022. So may mga iba po na na-approve din po sa GAA na hindi po na-consider din po sa NEP. So possible din po 'yon. But you would look at if you would look at the pie chart, you would see here that 91% corresponds to adaptation measures and just 9% for mitigation. So you would see here, it's consistent with the priorities of the government that we really prioritize adaptation because of our vulnerability to climate impacts. So we prioritize adaptation, no? So dahil nga we're pretty much vulnerable and we are not really a significant emitter, therefore po, in terms of the budget po natin, we are more focused on adaptation. So ganun, yun po yung sinasabi din po ng figures na yan. If you look at the figures po per thematic priority, malaki po for water sufficiency because hard infra po ito. So in terms of budget, malaki po siya. So ito po ay because of the budget po of DPWH in coming up po with flood rehabilitation programs din po nila. So wherein they already integrated po yung sa kanilang standards din po yung climate change. So yun po yung percentage per thematic priority. And ito po yung mga top 10 agencies po natin for fiscal year 2022. So ito po yun. Okay. So over the years, ito naman po, no, as much as possible, kami po sa help desk, we try to provide as much information din po to really help and assist po yung ating mga stakeholders. So we came up po with the climate budget brief. Before po kasi, we had po a climate budget brief po that's done by World Bank. 2016 pa po yun. So we picked it up. Pero nag-start pa lang po kami ng 2020 kasi ngayon lang po kami nagkaroon ng tao talaga sa help desk. So we started really with coming up with knowledge products and reports po on the National CCET. So we do have climate budget brief. So from AR to NEP to GAA, pero yung AR nga po ay internal lang po namin ni DBM. So you can actually look into the climate budget briefs po natin for starting fiscal year 2020. Tama no? Fiscal year 2020. So meron na po tayong NEP and GAA figures po niyan for that one po. So yun. And then we also came up with national CCET tools. May manual and briefers din po tayo. Sa local CCET naman din po, meron din po kaming mga gantong knowledge products din po. So anyways, ito naman din po, we tried to also do some monitoring din po. This one is based on the figures po from DBM. We already have actual figures po from 27, meaning yung actual expenditure na din po. So na-implement na din po siya. So we do have figures po from actual figures po of the expenditures from 2017 to 2020 and then GAA figures po for 2021 and 2022. You would see here din po in terms of the participation of NGAs because po no nagkaroon na din po kami ng specialized and customized session for GOCCs and SUCs. We saw an increase po of participation from the NGAs na rin po or the national government instrumentalities din po. And nag-reflect din po siya doon sa submissions naman din po natin. So mas dumami din po yung mga submissions sa amin. Before, yung ilang SUCs lang po yung nagsasubmit po sa amin, but last year po, madami na pong SUCs na nag-submit. Same po for the GOCCs. No? So we don't normally receive po a lot of submissions po from them. Pero because of the capacity building po that we've done last year, so nag-increase na din po siya. We also have po an online submission portal, an online portal po. Ipapakita ko din po sa inyo later. So where you could see also the resources. You can download the resources din po for CCET. So climate budget brief, meron po akong sample, hindi ko po alam kung makikita. Hindi ko kasi makita yung sarili ko. So meron po kami nito, a climate budget brief din po. So dito niyo po makikita, sino-sino po ba mga agencies, how much ang inallocate nila, ano po ba yung mga programs nila for climate change. Depende po sa level po ng budget cycle po natin. So if it's NEP or GAA level na po, we also tried to do some enhancements na rin po over the years. So maya't maya, nag-improve din po kami ng aming mga climate budget briefs. So meron na rin po kami, nag-start na rin po kami doon sa pag-harmonize namin with the PCBRRP of the ENR. So meron na rin po kaming section dyan. Baka this year po, we'll try to look into doing some enhancements naman po doon sa DRR component, yung climate change component sa DRR. We are also talking with OCD. So gusto din po kasi nila malaman sa how much din po is the government allocating din po for the NDRIMP. So halimbawa, since we have the climate budget tagging, so pwede din po natin tingnan din po doon. So these are just some of the enhancements po na tinitingnan din po namin na baka po i-introduce din po namin this year. So, as I mentioned before, currently po, dinidevelop pa lang po namin sa ngayon yung GAA 2022 Climate Budget Brief dahil kaka-receive lang din po namin 2 weeks ago. So, gagawa na din po namin ng report po yun. Meron na po kami for AR, NEP, and GAA. So, hopefully po, titingnan namin kung may time pa kami. Gagawin po namin yung expenditure side naman po, yung expenditure level naman na climate budget brief. So, titingnan din po namin then we wanted to also come up with an assessment din po of the implementation, yung actual programs din po that were implemented. So, we've not done that yet. So, it's that's something that we would like to improve din po moving forward. So, if you would see here, CCET is a very important tool because yun nga no, sinasabi natin we are doing so much to address climate change. We're not even the main culprits, no. But the CCET could be a powerful tool na rin po because it provides na rin yung quantitative figures po natin. How much exactly is the government appropriating for their climate programs. So this can actually serve as a tool for the government to come up with policies to address climate change. It also promotes convergence because it's tagged po, the typology code po natin is per thematic priorities of the NCCAP. So if we would like to mainstream climate change po in addressing food security, for instance, what's the performance of the agencies? How are these agencies working together to ensure that we are able to achieve food security din po? So these are just some examples. So the CCET process could help us promote convergence among the government agencies. Third is it also facilitates country's readiness din po. There are some experiences na rin po. May mga iba, of course, hindi naman to lahat, no? So may mga iba, because po nasa CCET po nila yon, na-approve po yung budget, but again, depende po yan, case to case po yon. So dahil po nakatag po sa CCET, na-approve po yon, there are some instances na ganun, some naman po hindi. It really depends on the fiscal space po natin and the priorities of the government at that particular period. Second, may mga iba naman po na pinasok nila, let's say, sa kanilang tier 2, kung hindi po na-approve, may mga development partners din po that would ask agencies, ano po ba yung gusto nyo, ano po ba yung priorities nyo? Since may CCET na rin po, medyo maayos na rin po yung kanilang strategies po doon. So, pwede na din po nilang i-access, no? So, it's actually a way for you to also mobilize financing din po for your programs that may not be budgeted by the Philippine government. So, pwede din po yun maging tool din po. So, may mga instances po kami naririnig na ganun, hindi po siya na-approve sa tier 2, pinafund nila doon sa ano. So it's easier na for them to do proposals kasi po na undergo na din po nila yung assessment yan or evaluation yan that this is a climate program and this is a priority. It's just unfortunate that we cannot accommodate that in the current budget because of the fiscal space po natin, limited fiscal space. So yun po, pwede din po yun magamit for that po. So again, ito po, kami po yung help desk. We're here to build capacities din po to help you go through the process of tagging. We also do evaluation po of agency proposals. So we evaluate for your QARs. We are also tasked to review and approve new typology proposals. It's in the works na rin po. Tinitingnan din po namin how do we exactly do the or come up with new typologies kasi po like for instance, pag may bagong typology po, kailangan din po mabago din po sa OSBP, yung UWACS code din po, may mga ganun eh. So kailangan din po natin tingnan yung totality na yon. Ano po ba yung kailangan pang magamit or maayos sa system, no? So, but we are tasked to review and approve new typology proposals. And together with DBM and DILG, for both national and local, we prepare the budget briefs. So, for national po, we prepare po the national budget briefs. So, for local po ay aayusin pa namin din po with DILG and DBM po. Baka mag-come up na rin po kami ng local climate change investment briefs. So, may mga, kasi po, sa annual investment programs po yung tagging process po for local government units. So, who are the members of the help desk? So kami po yun. This is our contact information. For the National CCET, please email us at ccethelpdesk@climate.gov.ph. This is our landline number. It's 02 if you're outside Manila. Metro Manila po. So 8254, kung makita yung siya, ayan, 7056. We also have a mobile number, 0926067852. May mga focals din po kami. So for si Joe po ang focal po natin, main technical focal po natin for National CCET. So ang coverage po niya ay lahat ng SUCs, GOCCs, and SUCs. And si Franz naman po for local CCET. So ang coverage naman po niya ay lahat ng LGUs, provinces, cities, and municipalities. So ganito lang din po kami kakonte. So please po, pakihabaan na lang din po yung pasensya nyo kung hindi po namin kayo agad ma-accommodate. But yun nga po, pagdating na din po dun sa QAR certification po, naglagay na din po kami ng timeline din po namin at nilagay na din po namin as part ng ARTA po namin. So may number of days din po kami that we have to respond to your concerns din po pagdating po dun sa approval ng QAR. So ito po yung bumubuo ng CCET Help Desk. So if you have questions po, please don't hesitate po to reach out to us. May mga iba po na nagsasubmit na po sa amin ng QAR. Nire-review na po namin. May mga iba naman po na nagpapa-request na din po ng Zoom meeting. So napupuno na rin po yung aming calendar. So kung meron po kayong mga questions din po sa amin and gusto niyo po mag-reach out at gusto niyo po mag-request din po ng special session lang din po sa amin para matulungan din po namin kayo. Mag-reach out lang din po kayo sa amin para ma-schedule din po natin siya. So ito po yung ating NCCAP portal. So ipapakita ko lang din po yung portal po natin. I think that's the last slide. So isa-stop share ko na to. Pupunta lang po tayo doon sa NCCAP portal po natin. Yan. Kita niyo na po ba? Okay. So ito po yung NCCAP portal po namin. Ito po yung this is a sub portal po ng ating Climate Change Commission's website. And then, dito po namin ina-upload po yung mga certain climate informations po that you would need, no? So, punta po tayo sa climate finance. So, ito po yung link po natin, nicthis.climate.gov.ph. Punta po kayo sa climate finance at meron po tayo dito, CCET. So, yan. So, nandito na po yung mga resources, yung mga manuals, toolkits, QAR forms at the national level and also local CCET. So, nandito na po yan. Pwede nyo pong i-download lahat po ng mga forms. Yung mga issuances po natin at the national and local level. Mga studies po. So, gusto nyo pong makita yung original CPR study po natin. Nandyan po siya. Yung mga reports po namin, yung mga climate budget briefs. So, nandito na din po. And then, yung figures po. Especially po yung mga SUCs po natin or yung mga researchers po natin who would like to look into the budget. So meron na po tayo ditong Excel file ng mga figures na pwede niyo pong i-download from 2017 to 2022. And then yung mga briefers po natin. So meron po tayo yan. Yan. I-upload na rin po namin dito in the next few weeks yung session po natin this week. So if you wanted to know more about CCET, how do you exactly tag yung mga ganyan, mga videos po na dito po namin siya ilalagay. Yung data visualization, it's for, i-improve pa namin siya para makita niyo po dito, let's say, you wanted to see po a particular SUC, ano po ba yung mga sinabit niya sa Climate Change Commission, at gusto niyo po makita yung mga programs po niya for climate change na na-approve, so i-upload po natin yan dito. If you wanted to know, let's say, ano po ba yung program si DNR, over the years, sa NEP and sa GAA. So, makikita nyo na din po dito. So, inaayos po namin siya currently. And this year din po, although this one is limited lang po muna for SICAM DRR Cabinet Cluster member agencies, magkakaroon po kami ng pilot po ng QAR submission online. So, dito na po ninyo, pwede na po kasing isubmit dito sa NICDIS portal po yung inyong mga QARs for review. So dito niyo po matatrack niyo po kung nasaan na po yung papel niyo within the Climate Change Commission. And matatrack niyo na rin yung papel niyo kung nasa inyo na po, nabalik na po namin sa inyo at waiting po kami sa revise. So yung mga ganyan po. Of course, ang makikita niyo lang din po doon is yung QAR forms niyo. Hindi niyo po makikita din siya, of course, yung mga QAR submissions po ng iba, no, for security reasons lang din po. So especially na hindi pa siya final, no? So, pag final na, yung mga figures na yan, pwede siyang mailagay sa public. So, hanggat nandun pa tayo sa stage ng pag-review process pa lang din po. So, ito po yung gagamitin po natin. Ipapilot test po namin siya for the SICAM DRR member agencies. And then, hopefully po, sa NEP and sa GAA, kung may mga changes din po tayo doon, pwede nyo na po magamit po yung system na yan. And then for next year po, for fiscal year, for budget preparation for fiscal year 2024, online na po natin gagawin lahat po yun. Kumbaga, i-open na po namin sa lahat ng mga agencies, SUCs and GOCCs po. So, i-test run lang po muna namin sa ngayon for selected agencies lang po muna para matest po namin yung system kung may mga kailangan pa kami i-edit, etc. So, yun po. So, pwede niyo po makita dito. If you're curious po doon sa mga climate reports, meron din po kaming gender dito, gender and climate change, mga action plans po, yung mga NCCAPs, like for instance po, so yun po, may LCCAP din po tayo dito. So, pwede nyo po ma-download po yung mga modules, guidebooks, tools, etc. So, ganun din po for the NCCAP, M&E. So, meron din po tayong resources din po dito. Ayan po, pwede nyo po ma-download. So, marami po tayong mga information po dito if you wanted to know more about the GHG inventory, ganun din po. So, yun po, you can browse through the NICDIS portal po for your information din po. So that ends my presentation. Thank you very much po. If you have questions, I'll try to answer it later po. Thank you.